She found the Vampire King's lost daughter half frozen in a snowdrift at midnight. The entire palace was searching in the wrong direction. What the orphan girl didn't realize, the desperate king watching from his tower would remember her kindness for the rest of his immortal life, and the child clinging to her neck would never let her go. The winter wind cut through Mara's threadbare coat like knives made of ice. Her fingers had gone numb an hour ago, but she kept walking, one foot in front of the other, because stopping meant freezing, and freezing meant joining her parents in whatever cold ground waited beyond this life. 3 months since the fever took them both within a week of each other. 3 months since the village elders handed her a copper coin and told her to find work in the capital before winter made the roads impassable. She'd been too late. The blizzard had caught her 2 miles from the city gates, turning the world into a howling void of white. Mara couldn't see the road anymore. Couldn't see anything except swirling snow and the dark shapes of pine trees bending under the wind's weight. Her legs trembled with exhaustion. Just a little further, she told herself. The same lie she'd been repeating for the past hour. Her foot caught on something buried in the snow. She stumbled, falling hard onto her knees. The cold bit through her skirt instantly, shocking her fully awake. Mara's hands touched something that wasn't snow. Fabric. Warm fabric. She dug frantically, her frozen fingers scraping away powder and ice until she uncovered a small boot. Then a leg. Then a tiny body curled into a ball. A child, a little girl no older than 3, wearing a velvet coat far too fine for any village child, with white blonde hair spilling across the snow like moonlight. The girl's lips were blue, her skin pale as death. But when Mara pressed shaking fingers to her throat, she felt it. A pulse. Faint and slow. But there, the child's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and dark as midnight. She stared at Mara without seeing, her small body shaking with cold so violent her teeth rattled. Mara didn't think. She stripped off her own coat, wrapped it around the child's frozen body, and pulled the girl against her chest. The little one was cold as ice, unnaturally cold. But she was alive, and that was enough. "I've got you," Mara whispered, though the wind stole her words. "You're safe now." The child's small hand clutched at Mara's dress, holding tight with surprising strength. A sound escaped her lips, something between a whimper and a word Mara couldn't understand. But the grip said everything. "Don't leave me. Don't let go." Mara wouldn't. She stood, legs screaming in protest, and began walking again. The child weighed almost nothing, but each step felt like dragging an anchor through deep water. The world had narrowed to just this, one breath at a time, one step at a time, keeping this small life warm against her own failing body. She didn't know how long she walked. Time lost meaning in the white void. Her vision blurred at the edges, dark spots dancing across the snow. Her body began to feel warm, which she knew was wrong, knew was dangerous, but couldn't fight anymore. Then lights appeared through the storm, golden and bright, piercing the darkness like stars fallen to earth. Torches. Dozens of them, moving through the trees in a scattered line. Voices shouted over the wind, calling a name Mara couldn't quite hear. She tried to call back, but her voice came out as barely a whisper. Her legs gave out. She fell to her knees in the snow, still clutching the child, still keeping that small body wrapped tight and warm against her chest. The torches turned toward her. Figures emerged from the white tall shadows and dark cloaks, moving with inhuman speed. Then someone was kneeling beside her, pulling back his hood to reveal a face carved from marble and desperation. He was beautiful in the way winter storms were beautiful, dangerous and cold and ancient. Silver threaded through his dark hair despite a face that looked no older than 30. His eyes were the color of ice reflecting moonlight, and they were fixed on the child in Mara's arms with an expression of such raw relief it hurt to witness. His hands reached out, trembling despite their steadiness, and gently touched the little girl's face. She's breathing, he said, and his voice broke on the words like glass shattering. You found her. You kept her warm. The child stirred at his voice, turning her face toward him. Papa, she whispered, so quiet Mara barely heard it. The man, the king, Mara realized with dawning shock as she recognized the crown half hidden beneath his hood, carefully lifted his daughter from Mara's arms. The little girl immediately began to cry, reaching back toward Mara with desperate hands, her small voice rising in distress. No. No. Stay. Her. Want her. The king froze, staring at his daughter in confusion. Sweetheart, I'm here. You're safe now. But the child thrashed in his arms, straining toward Mara, her cries growing more frantic. The desperation in those small sounds cut through Mara's exhaustion like nothing else could. She reached out instinctively, laying one hand on the girl's arm. I'm here too, Mara murmured. See? Right here. The child's crying stopped instantly. She grabbed Mara's hand with both of hers, holding tight, and the tension drained from her small body. The king's eyes met Mara's over his daughter's head. There was something in his gaze she couldn't name. Gratitude mixed with confusion, mixed with something deeper that looked almost like pain. Who are you? He asked quietly. Nobody, Mara whispered. The world tilted sideways, the king's face blurred at the edges, doubling and tripling until she couldn't tell which image was real. Her hand slipped from the child's grip, as darkness rushed up to meet her like a wave of warm water, pulling her down into depths where the cold couldn't reach, and nothing hurt anymore. The last thing she felt was strong arms catching her before she hit the ground. The last thing she heard was the king's voice, sharp with command. Bring her. She saved my daughter's life. She comes with us. Then nothing. Mara woke to warmth. Real warmth. The kind that sank into bones and made muscles unclench after holding tight against the cold for so long. She lay in softness that felt like floating on clouds, her eyes opened slowly, adjusting to golden light that came from a fireplace large enough to roast an entire ox. The room around her was larger than the cottage where she'd grown up. Stone walls hung with tapestries showing forests and stars. A ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Windows of colored glass that turned the gray winter light into pools of crimson and sapphire on the floor. She was in the palace, in a bed with silk sheets and pillows stuffed with down, wearing a nightgown of cotton so fine it felt like water against her skin. Panic seized her chest. She sat up too quickly, and the room spun. A hand pressed gently against her shoulder, easing her back down. Easy, a woman's voice said. Warm and grandmotherly. You've been sleeping for nearly a day. Your body needed the rest. Mara turned her head. An elderly woman sat beside the bed, human not vampire, with silver hair braided into a crown and eyes that crinkled at the corners from decades of smiling. She wore the simple dress of a palace servant, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned her place through years of service. Where Mara began, but her throat was too dry to finish. The woman held a cup to her lips. Water, cool and pure. Mara drank gratefully. You're in the east wing of the palace, the woman explained. The king's personal guest chambers. He ordered you brought here after you collapsed in the forest. Said anyone who saved his daughter's life deserved the finest care we could provide. The memories came flooding back. The snowstorm. The child half buried in the drift. Those tiny hands clinging to her. Is she? Mara whispered. The little girl. Is she? Princess Ilara is perfectly well, the woman said with a smile that transformed her entire face. Thanks entirely to you. The royal physician says another 10 minutes in that storm and she would have been beyond saving. But you found her. Kept her warm with your own body heat even when you were freezing yourself. The woman's eyes grew misty. That took courage, child, and kindness rarer than any jewel in the king's treasury. Mara's cheeks flushed. I just did what anyone would. No, the woman said firmly. You did what most wouldn't. Half the nobles in this palace would have walked right past a freezing child if stopping meant risking their own comfort. She stood, smoothing her skirts. My name is Beatrice. I've served the royal family for 40 years, and I've been assigned to care for you during your stay. Whatever you need, you ask me. Understood? During my stay? Mara repeated. How long? As long as necessary. A man's voice answered from the doorway. Mara's head turned so fast her vision blurred. The king stood in the entrance, tall and imposing even in simple dark clothing without his crown. In daylight filtering through the colored windows, she could see details she'd missed in the storm. The way his shoulders carried tension like armor, the faint scars on his knuckles that spoke of old battles, the shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept since the night in the forest. Behind him, peeking around his leg, was the little girl from the Snowstorm. Princess Ilara looked nothing like the half-frozen child Mara had found. Her white blonde hair was brushed and braided with ribbons. Her cheeks had color now, rosy and healthy. She wore a dress of pale blue velvet that probably cost more than Mara's entire village had seen in a year. But her eyes, those dark midnight eyes, were fixed on Mara, with an intensity that seemed too old for such a young face. Beatrice curtsied deeply and left, closing the door softly behind her. The king moved further into the room, his daughter's hand clasped in his. They stopped a respectful distance from the bed, though Ilara strained forward, clearly wanting to come closer. The king's free hand moved in a gentle, restraining gesture. Mara tried to sit up properly, to show respect, but her body protested every movement. The king raised his other hand in a staying motion. Please, don't. You're still recovering. He paused, and something flickered across his face, an expression caught between formality and raw emotion. I am King Aldrich Thorn, he said quietly, and you saved the most precious thing in my world. I owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. You don't owe me anything, Mara said. Her voice came out smaller than she'd intended. I'm nobody. Just your name, he interrupted gently. I would know the name of my daughter's savior. Mara Ashford. Mara, he repeated it as if testing the weight of the word. From where? The eastern villages, Your Majesty. My parents were farmers. They died 3 months ago. I was traveling to the capital to find work when the storm caught me. Something shifted in his expression. Orphaned, he said. Not a question, but a statement heavy with understanding. Yes. For a moment, silence filled the room, not uncomfortable, but weighted with things unsaid. Then Princess Ilara pulled free from her father's hand and ran to the bedside. She climbed onto the mattress with the determined grace of a child who'd never been told no, and wrapped her small arms around Mara's neck. The king moved forward instinctively, as if to stop her, then froze. Ilara pressed her face against Mara's shoulder. You stayed, the little girl whispered. In the cold, you stayed with me. You didn't leave. Mara's arms came up automatically, encircling the child's small body. Of course I stayed. I would never leave you. The princess pulled back just enough to look into Mara's eyes. Her small face was serious, solemn in a way that made her seem much older than 3. Promise? Promise, Mara said, the word coming from somewhere deep and instinctive. The child's face transformed with a smile so bright it could have lit the entire room. She looked back at her father. See, Papa? I told you, she's the one. She stays. King Aldrich's expression was complicated, layers of emotion Mara couldn't begin to parse. He looked at his daughter, then at Mara, then at their joined hands. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Ilara, sweetheart, Miss Mara needs to rest. We should, no, Ilara said firmly. She stays. I stay. We stay together. The king's jaw tightened. He moved closer, kneeling beside the bed so he was eye level with his daughter. Darling, he said gently, Miss Mara has been very sick. She needs to sleep and get stronger. We'll visit again soon. Ilara's lower lip trembled. Her small hands clutched tighter at Mara's nightgown. No, Papa, not again. Can't lose again. Can't. The king's face went pale. His hands reached out, touching his daughter's arms with infinite gentleness. You're not losing anyone. I promise. Elara, I promise. But the child was shaking now, her breathing coming fast and shallow. Mara recognized the signs of panic building, the same way she'd seen it in her younger cousins after their mother died. Before thinking, before questioning, she began humming, a simple melody her own mother used to sing, a lullaby about stars and safety and never being alone. Her hand moved in slow circles on Elara's back, a soothing rhythm that matched the tune. The princess's breathing slowed, the trembling eased. She leaned into Mara's touch like a flower turning toward sunlight, and her eyes drifted half-closed. Safe, Elara whispered. Feel safe. King Aldrich stared at them both. The carefully controlled expression had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. When he spoke, his voice was rough. She hasn't let anyone comfort her like that since. He stopped. Swallowed hard. Since her mother died 6 months ago. The words landed like stones in still water. Mara's hand paused its circling for just a moment before resuming. I'm so sorry, she said quietly. The king's eyes met hers. There was an ocean of grief in them, deep and cold and endless. We were searching for Elara because she ran away from her attendants during a winter festival. She does that sometimes. Runs, like she's trying to outrun the loss. He glanced at his daughter, who was now drowsing against Mara's shoulder. The storm came up so fast, we didn't know she'd gone so far into the forest. By the time we realized, he stopped again, his hand clenching into a fist against his thigh. I thought I'd lost her too. I thought, you didn't, Mara said. She's here. She's safe. She's safe because of you, he corrected. Because you gave up your own warmth to keep her alive. Because you didn't leave her even when you were dying yourself. His gaze intensified. Why? Mara looked down at Elara's sleeping face, so peaceful now, so trusting. Because she needed someone to stay, Mara said simply. And there was no one else. That's reason enough. The king studied her for a long moment. Then he stood in one fluid motion and moved to the door. He paused with his hand on the frame. Not looking back, the physician says you need several more days of rest before you're strong enough to travel. You'll remain here as my guest until then. All your needs will be provided for. When you're well, I'll ensure you have letters of reference and enough gold to start whatever life you choose. It's the least I can do. But, Mara began. His shoulders tensed. If you wish to refuse, if being here makes you uncomfortable, I will arrange for your care elsewhere. I would never force no, Mara said quickly. It's not that. She glanced at Elara sleeping against her. What about her? She said she wanted me to stay. The king's back was still to her, but she saw his head bow slightly. My daughter is 3 years old and grieving. She doesn't understand what she's asking. You have your own life to build, Miss Ashford. I cannot ask you to. What if I want to? The words surprised Mara as much as they seemed to surprise him. He turned slowly, his expression unreadable. Want to what? Stay, Mara said, for a while at least. Until she feels safer. Until she doesn't need, she will always need, the king said, and there was something broken in his voice. That's the problem. Elara attaches herself to people and then loses them, and every loss cuts deeper than the last. I cannot let her become dependent on someone who will eventually leave. I won't leave, Mara said. Not until she's ready. Not until you both are. The king's eyes searched her face as if looking for deception, for hidden motives, for anything that made sense of a stranger offering kindness without price. You don't know what you're offering. I know I don't have anywhere else to go, Mara said honestly. I know I'm alone in the world now. And I know that little girl feels safe with me, and she paused, surprised by the tightness in her own throat. I haven't felt needed since my parents died. If I can help her, even just for a little while, that's enough. That's more than enough. Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Wind rattled the colored windows. Elara's breathing was soft and even against Mara's shoulder. Finally, the king spoke. 1 month, he said. You'll stay as Alara's companion for 1 month. You'll be given a room adjoining the nursery, appropriate clothing, and a small salary. At the end of the month, we'll reassess. If you wish to leave, I'll keep my promise of references in gold. If Alara has adjusted, you'll be free to pursue your own path. And if she hasn't adjusted? Mara asked. Then we'll discuss it again, the king said. But I won't trap you here out of my daughter's grief. You deserve more than to be a temporary bandage on a wound that won't heal. Maybe, Mara said softly, looking at the sleeping child. But sometimes temporary bandages are exactly what's needed until the healing starts. The king's expression shifted. For just a moment, the careful control slipped completely, and she saw the man underneath the crown. A father terrified of failing his child, a widower drowning in loss. A king who'd learned that all his power couldn't protect the people he loved most. Thank you, he said quietly. Then he left, closing the door softly behind him. Mara looked down at Princess Alara, still sleeping peacefully, small fingers clutching the fabric of the nightgown like an anchor. 1 month, Mara whispered to the sleeping child. Let's see if we can help you feel safe again. Outside the window, snow continued to fall. But inside, in the warmth and golden light, something that felt almost like hope began to bloom in the spaces between grief. The nursery was a contradiction of lavishness and loneliness. Toys carved from rare woods sat untouched on shelves. Picture books with gilded pages lay in neat stacks, their spines uncracked. A rocking horse, with a mane of real horsehair, stood frozen in the corner, gathering dust. Everything was perfect. Everything was unused. Everything spoke of a child who'd stopped playing. Mara stood in the doorway of her new room, which connected to the nursery through a door left permanently open at Alara's insistence. 3 days had passed since she'd woken in the guest chambers. 3 days of slowly regaining strength while Alara barely left her side. The princess would sit on the edge of Mara's bed for hours, sometimes talking in her small voice about birds and snow and Mama used to, sometimes just holding Mara's hand in silence. Beatrice brought meals and fresh clothes and gentle conversation. The king came twice each day, morning and evening, to check on his daughter. He never stayed long. Would stand in the doorway watching Alara curl against Mara's side, something unreadable crossing his face, before nodding once and leaving. But today, the physician had declared Mara well enough to move about. Hence the new room, the new clothes, the new reality of whatever this month would hold. You're really staying? Alara asked from behind her. Mara turned to find the princess standing in the nursery, clutching a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Its fur was matted from being held too tight, one ear partially torn. The only toy in the entire room that looked loved. Really staying, Mara confirmed. She knelt down to Alara's level. For 1 whole month at least. The princess's face scrunched in concentration. How long is a month? About 30 days. How long is a day? Mara smiled. From when you wake up to when you go to sleep, then wake up again. That's 1 day. Alara considered this seriously. That's a lot of wake-ups. It is, Mara agreed. The child stepped closer, her free hand reaching out to touch Mara's face. A gentle, wondering touch as if confirming reality. Will you play with me? She asked quietly. The question was simple, the weight behind it was not. Mara understood instinctively that this was a test, though not a malicious one, a child's way of asking. Will you see me? Will you stay even when it's boring? Will you choose me? I would love to play with you, Mara said. What should we play? Alara's eyes brightened, but there was hesitation there too. An uncertainty that spoke of too many disappointments. We could read? She suggested. Mama used to read to me. Books it is, Mara said. Show me your favorite. The next hour passed in a pool of afternoon sunlight on the nursery floor. Alara brought book after book, and Mara read each one with different voices for different characters. The princess started tentative, sitting apart, but slowly migrated closer until she was pressed against Mara's side, small finger pointing at pictures, sometimes correcting the story when Mara deliberately got details wrong. No, Elara would say with the beginning of a giggle. The rabbit is supposed to be brave there, not scared. Oh, you're absolutely right, Mara would say seriously. Shall I read it again properly? Yes, please. They were deep into a tale about a dragon who befriended a mouse when the nursery door opened. King Aldrich stood in the entrance, still wearing his formal council robes. He must have come directly from state business. His expression was weary, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight no rest could ease. But when he saw them there on the floor, books scattered like fallen leaves, his daughter actually smiling, something in his face softened. Papa, Elara called, waving. Mara is reading about the dragon. Do you remember this one? The king moved into the room slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might break whatever magic had brought light back to his daughter's eyes. I remember, he said quietly. Your mother loved that story. She said the mouse reminded her of herself. Elara nodded seriously. Because Mama was small, but brave. Very brave. The king agreed. His voice had gone rough around the edges. He cleared his throat. I came to say goodnight, sweetheart. It's nearly bedtime. Already? Elara's face fell. But we were reading. Perhaps Miss Mara could read you one more story before sleep, the king suggested, if she's not too tired. Mara glanced up, meeting his eyes. There was a question there, and a plea. A father asking for help he didn't know how to request directly. I'm not tired at all, Mara said. One more story sounds perfect. Unless, she paused. Would you like to stay and listen, Your Majesty? The question seemed to surprise him. His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment the careful royal mask slipped entirely. He looked like a man offered something he'd wanted desperately but didn't believe he deserved. I wouldn't want to intrude. You wouldn't be, Elara said immediately. Sit with us, Papa. Please? Something in the king's expression cracked. He lowered himself to the floor with unconscious grace, settling nearby but not quite close enough to touch. Elara immediately scrambled from Mara's side to her father's lap. Curling there with practiced ease, she reached back toward Mara, making grabbing motions with one hand while keeping the other wrapped around her father's arm. Mara shifted closer, close enough that Elara could lean against her shoulder while remaining in her father's embrace. The three of them formed a small circle in the fading sunlight. Mara opened a new book, this one about stars that fell to earth and became flowers. She read slowly, letting the words paint pictures in the air between them. Elara's eyes grew heavy halfway through, her small body relaxing completely, held safe between two people she trusted. The king's hand moved unconsciously, stroking his daughter's hair with infinite gentleness. Mara watched his face as she read. Saw the grief there, yes. But also something else. A father drinking in this moment like a man dying of thirst, as if he'd forgotten what it felt like to hold his child without the weight of loss crushing them both. When Mara finished the story, Elara was asleep. The king didn't move immediately, just sat there with his daughter in his arms, eyes closed, breathing slow and deliberate. Thank you, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. For? Everything, he said. This. He gestured vaguely at the scene around them. I haven't seen her this peaceful since. He stopped. Since before. You're welcome, Mara said quietly. Should I help you carry her to bed? The king nodded. They moved together carefully, not wanting to wake the sleeping child. The princess's bedroom adjoined the nursery through another door, and her bed was a confection of pillows and soft blankets. King Aldrich laid his daughter down with the practiced care of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He pulled the blankets up, tucked her stuffed rabbit beside her, and pressed a kiss to her forehead. Sleep well, little one, he murmured. Dream of dragons and brave mice. He straightened, and Mara saw him steel himself, rebuilding the walls that had come down during the story. When he turned to face her in the dim light from the hallway, he was the king again. Formal. Distant. I should let you rest as well, he said. Tomorrow Elara has lessons with her tutor in the morning. You're welcome to join her, Or you may have the time to yourself. Actually, Mara said before she could think better of it, I was hoping we could talk. About Alara. The king's posture shifted slightly. Of course. We can speak in the morning if you'd like. I mean now if you have time, Mara said. Unless you're too busy, He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. Very well. Follow me. He led her through corridors Mara was still learning, past tapestries and portraits of stern-faced ancestors. They walked in silence until he opened a door into a smaller room, a study, lined with books and warmed by a fire already burning in the hearth. He gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs near the fireplace. When they were both seated, he looked at her with those ancient, tired eyes. What did you wish to discuss? She's grieving, Mara said simply. But you already know that. I do, he said. What you may not know, Mara continued carefully, is that she's also terrified. Of losing people, of being left again. Every time you leave the room, even just to say goodnight, she tenses up. Watches the door like she's waiting for it to be the last time. The king's jaw tightened. I've noticed. Mara leaned forward. I'm not a mother. I'm not an expert on children. But I lost both my parents recently, so I understand what it feels like when your whole world disappears. And I think. She paused, choosing her words carefully. I think Alara needs to know that it's safe to be happy again. That loving people doesn't mean losing them. The king's hands gripped the arms of his chair. And how exactly do I teach her that? He asked quietly, when I can't even promise it's true. When I failed to keep her mother safe. When I nearly lost her in that storm. When every day I wake up terrified that something else will take her from me. The raw honesty in his voice struck Mara like a physical blow. She saw him fully then. Not the vampire king who'd ruled for centuries, but the father drowning in fear and grief, and the weight of responsibilities that left no room for weakness. You can't promise nothing bad will ever happen, Mara said softly. But you can promise to be there through it, to face it together, to show her that love doesn't make you weak, it makes you strong enough to keep going even when everything hurts. His eyes met hers. There was something desperate in them. And you think you can help with that? In 1 month? I think I can try, Mara said. I think we can try together. Because she needs you, your majesty. She needs her father, but she needs a father who isn't so afraid of losing her that he keeps her at arm's length. The king flinched. Is that what I'm doing? Sometimes, Mara said gently. Tonight was different. Tonight you sat with us. You let yourself be close. And she bloomed because of it. His expression was complicated. Layers of pain and hope and fear all tangled together. What if I fail again? Then we try again, Mara said. And again. Until it gets easier. Until she knows, really knows deep down, that you're not going anywhere. That I'm not going anywhere. For 1 month, the king said. After that, you'll leave to build your own life. That was our agreement. Mara met his gaze steadily. 1 month where I stay, she said. That's what I agreed to. I never agreed to what happens after. The king stared for a long moment. Neither of them spoke. The fire crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Then, very quietly, he said, You would stay longer? If she still needs me, Mara said, if you both still need me. Then yes. Why? The question was sharp. Why would you bind yourself to a child who isn't yours? To a life that isn't the future you planned? Mara thought about her parents, about the empty cottage and the village that had sent her away with a single copper coin, about walking through the snowstorm with nothing ahead but uncertainty and cold, about finding a freezing child and choosing to stay even when it meant risking her own life. Because planning a future alone isn't the same as having one, she said. Because that little girl makes me feel like I matter, like I have a purpose beyond just surviving. And because, she paused, surprised by the truth of her own words. You both look at me like I'm not invisible, Like I'm not just another orphan nobody wants. Like I'm someone worth keeping. The king's expression shifted. The careful control crumbled completely, and what remained was raw and honest, and almost painful to witness. You are worth keeping, he said roughly. Anyone who couldn't see that was a fool. Mara's throat tightened. She looked away, focusing on the fire. Thank you, she whispered. They sat in silence for a while, not uncomfortable but heavy with things neither knew how to name. Finally, the king stood. It's late, he said. You should rest. Tomorrow will be. He paused. Tomorrow I'd like to join you and Alara for breakfast, if that's acceptable. More than acceptable, Mara said. She's happiest when you're there. The king's face did something complicated. He nodded once and moved toward the door, then stopped with his hand on the frame. Miss Ashford. Yes, Your Majesty. My name is Aldrich, he said without turning around. When we're in private, when it's just us trying to help my daughter heal, you may use it, if you're comfortable doing so. Mara's heart did something unexpected in her chest. Then you should call me Mara, she said. Just Mara. He glanced back over his shoulder. There was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Something warm and careful, and perhaps a little afraid. Good night, Mara. Good night, Aldrich. He left. Closing the door softly behind him, Mara sat by the fire for a long time after, watching the flames and wondering what exactly she'd agreed to. Wondering if 1 month would be enough to heal the cracks in this broken family. Wondering if she was ready for what happened if it wasn't. The next 3 weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost like peace. Mornings began with breakfast in the nursery. Just the three of them. Aldrich would arrive as dawn painted the windows gold, still wearing council robes but leaving his crown behind. He'd sit with Alara on his lap while Mara poured tea and told stories about her childhood in the village, simple stories about harvest festivals and summer rainstorms, and the way her mother used to braid flowers into her hair. Alara would listen with rapt attention, asking questions, and slowly, so slowly, Aldrich began to add his own memories, carefully at first, as if testing whether speaking of happiness would break it. He told Alara about her mother, about how the queen had loved winter despite being human, how she'd insisted on walking through snow barefoot just to feel it between her toes, about the way she'd sung lullabies in an ancient language and laughed at Aldrich's serious demeanor until he couldn't help but smile. At first, speaking of the queen made Alara cry. But Mara noticed something. The tears were different than before. Not the silent, swallowed grief of a child drowning alone. These were tears shared with her father, held safe in his arms while he cried too, quietly, teaching his daughter that sorrow could be survived when you faced it together. Then came lessons. Alara studied with tutors in mathematics and history and languages. Mara sat quietly in the corner during these, ostensibly there just for comfort, but the tutors quickly learned to include her. Would ask her opinion on stories, or request she help Alara practice reading aloud. One tutor, an elderly vampire named Master Cornelius, pulled Mara aside after a particularly good session. The child has learned more in 3 weeks than in 6 months prior, he said, eyes sharp behind wire spectacles. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. I'm not doing anything special, Mara protested. You're making her feel safe enough to try, the old vampire said. That's everything. Afternoons belonged to play. The neglected toys began to see use. The rocking horse galloped across imaginary fields. The wooden blocks became castles and villages and entire kingdoms. Mara and Alara would sprawl on the nursery floor, building worlds and destroying them and building them again, laughing when towers collapsed. Sometimes Aldrich would join them after council sessions, settling onto the floor despite his formal attire, letting Alara direct elaborate games where he played dragon or knight, or sometimes just a tree that needed to stand very still. Mara watched him learn to be silly, watched centuries of rigid control slowly unwind as he made monster noises and let his daughter climb on his back and surrendered completely to the simple joy of making her laugh, and she watched him watch her. Caught his eyes following her movements when he thought she wasn't looking, saw the way his expression softened when she sang Elara to sleep, or wiped away tears, or simply existed in their space with quiet patience. There was gratitude in those looks. But also something else. Something careful, and wondering, and almost afraid. Evenings meant dinner in the small family dining room, not the grand hall. Just 3 place settings. Simple food. Conversation that ranged from Elara's lessons to Mara's stories, to Aldrich's careful explanations of kingship stripped of formality. "What do you do all day, Papa?" Elara asked one night, swinging her legs under the table. "I attend council meetings where very serious people argue about very serious things," Aldrich said. "Like what? Like whether to build a new bridge over the Eastern River, or how to help villages that had poor harvests, or how to make sure everyone in the kingdom has what they need." "Do you help them?" Elara asked. "I try," Aldrich said. "Sometimes I succeed. Sometimes I fail. But I keep trying. Like how Mara keeps trying to teach me to braid, even though I'm terrible at it," Elara said seriously. "Exactly like that," Mara said, fighting a smile. The king's lips twitched. "You're teaching her to braid?" "Trying to," Mara said. "She's very determined." "I want to braid your hair, Papa," Elara announced. "But it's too short. We'll have to wait until I'm old like Master Cornelius," Aldrich said gravely. "Then you can braid to your heart's content." Elara giggled. "You're already old, Papa. You're like 1,000. I'm only 700, thank you very much," Aldrich said with mock offense. Practically a youth. More giggling. Mara watched them, warmth spreading through her chest. This was what healing looked like, not the absence of grief, but the return of lightness, the ability to laugh again without guilt. But beneath the peace, Mara felt time running out. 3 weeks gone. 1 week remaining. The thought sat heavy in her stomach during happy moments, turning sweetness bitter at the edges. She didn't want to leave. The realization came gradually, then all at once. This strange little family had become hers. This child she'd found in the snow had wrapped around her heart like bindweed, impossible to remove without damage. And the king, Aldrich. That was more complicated. She'd watch him with his daughter and feel something that wasn't maternal, wasn't simple friendship. Something that made her pulse quicken when his hand accidentally brushed hers. Something that made her heart ache when she caught him looking at her with that careful, wondering expression. But he was a king. An immortal vampire who'd loved and lost a queen, and she was just Mara Ashford, an orphan from a farming village who happened to be in the right place at the right time. The gap between them was uncrossable. Wasn't it? The 4th week began with autumn rain replacing snow. Water streamed down the palace windows, turning the world outside gray and blurred. Elara pressed her face to the glass, watching drops race each other down the panes. "Can we go outside?" she asked. "It's raining, sweetheart," Aldrich said from where he sat reviewing documents at the nursery writing desk. "You'll get soaked." "I like rain," Elara said. "Mama used to dance in rain, remember?" Aldrich's hand stilled on his papers. "I remember," he said quietly. Elara turned to Mara with pleading eyes. "Can we? Please? Just for a little bit?" Mara glanced at Aldrich. He met her gaze, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes. The instinct to say no. To keep his daughter safe and dry and controlled. The newer instinct, still fragile, to let her be happy even if it meant a little risk. "It's just water," Mara said gently. "We'll stay in the courtyard where you can see us from the window, and I'll make sure she doesn't get too cold." Aldrich studied them both. Then, slowly, he nodded. 10 minutes, he said. "Then you come in and get warm." Elara's face lit up like sunrise. She grabbed Mara's hand and pulled her toward the door. Mara snagged 2 cloaks on the way out, draping one over Elara's shoulders. They descended stairs and passed through corridors until they reached a small private courtyard. The moment they stepped outside, rain soaked through to skin. Elara laughed, spinning in circles with her face turned up to the sky. Mara watched her, something catching in her throat. This pure, unbridled joy from a child who'd been so lost in grief only weeks ago. "Look, Mara," Elara called. "I'm dancing like Mama. Come dance, too." Mara let herself be pulled into the spin. They turned in circles, holding hands, letting rain wash over them while puddles splashed beneath their feet. Above them, from the nursery window, Aldrich watched. Mara could feel his gaze like warmth against her back. When she glanced up, she saw him standing there, one hand pressed against the glass, his expression stripped of every defense. He looked like a man watching something he'd thought lost forever come back to life. Like a man remembering what happiness felt like. Like a man falling. Mara's breath caught. She stumbled in the dance, and Elara caught her hand, steadying her. "You okay?" the child asked. "Yes," Mara whispered. "I'm okay." They danced until the rain slowed to drizzle, until Elara began to shiver despite her laughter. Then Mara scooped up the princess and carried her inside, both of them dripping water across marble floors and laughing at the trail they left. Beatrice met them with warm towels and fond exasperation. "You'll catch your deaths," she scolded without heat, drying them both off like they were children. Aldrich appeared in the corridor, still holding that stripped, raw expression. His eyes found Mara's, held them. She saw questions there. Fears. Hopes. Things neither of them knew how to speak aloud. "I should get Elara into dry clothes," Mara said, breaking the gaze because holding it felt dangerous. Like standing at the edge of a cliff and wanting to jump. "Yes," Aldrich said. His voice was rough. "And then, Mara, we need to talk. About what happens when the month ends." Mara's stomach dropped. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and carried Elara back to the nursery. After getting the princess into warm, dry clothing and settling her with books and hot chocolate, Mara changed her own clothes with shaking hands. The month was ending. Tomorrow was the final day. Tomorrow she'd have to decide whether to leave or find some way to stay. Whether to protect her heart or risk it completely. Whether to walk away from this family that had become hers. She found Aldrich waiting in his study, the same room where they'd had their first real conversation. He stood by the window, looking out at the rain-washed gardens, his posture rigid. "Mara," he said without turning. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," she said quietly. She moved into the room, leaving the door half open out of propriety. He turned to face her. His expression was controlled again, the king's mask back in place, but she could see cracks in it. Fractures where the real man showed through. "Tomorrow marks the end of our agreement," he said. 1 month. You've fulfilled your part admirably. Elara is," he paused, searching for words. "She's healing. I can see it every day. The nightmares have lessened. The fear isn't as sharp. She's laughing again. Learning again. Living again." "That's because of you," Mara said. "You've been doing the work, letting her close. I've just been here." "You've been more than here," Aldrich said roughly. "You've been everything. A bridge between us when I'd forgotten how to reach her, a light in this place that's been dark too long." He stopped, jaw working. "You've become essential." Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. "Aldrich, No. Let me finish," he said. "Please." He moved away from the window, closer to her but still maintaining careful distance. This was supposed to be temporary. 1 month to help Elara adjust. Then you'd leave to pursue your own life with gold and references, and my eternal gratitude. That was the arrangement. His eyes met hers, and they were burning. "But I find myself unable to let you go." Mara couldn't breathe. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere in these 4 weeks, while watching you love my daughter with a selflessness I've rarely witnessed, while seeing you teach her that joy and sorrow can coexist, while listening to you tell stories and laugh and simply exist in our space, He swallowed hard. "I've come to care for you. Deeply. In a way I didn't think possible again." The words landed like lightning strikes. Mara felt them in her bones, electric and terrifying and wonderful. "But," she started, I know, Aldrich said. I know all the reasons this is impossible. You're human, young, with your whole life ahead. I'm centuries old, a king with responsibilities that never end, a widower still learning to breathe past grief. The gap between us is vast. Too vast. Mara's hands clenched at her sides. Then why tell me? Because you deserve honesty, he said. And because I need you to understand that if you choose to stay, it won't just be for Alara. It will be, he stopped, visibly gathering courage. It will be for me too. Because I don't want you to leave. Because I want you here, in our lives, in our family. Because I want the chance to see if this feeling growing between us could become something real, something lasting. If you want that too. Mara's throat was tight. Tears pricked her eyes. I'm scared, she whispered. So am I, Aldrich admitted. Terrified. Of losing someone again. Of failing you the way I failed my wife. Of caring this much when I know how badly it hurts when love ends. But I'm more scared of letting you walk away without telling you that you've brought this palace back to life. That you've helped me remember what it means to hope. That when I watch you with Alara, I see not just a caretaker, but a mother. And when I look at you, I see. He paused. I see someone I could love. Someone I think I'm already beginning to love. The confession hung in the air between them. Mara felt tears spill over, tracking hot down her cheeks. I don't know how to be what you need, she said. I don't know how to be a mother to a princess or anything to a king. I don't know if I'm enough. You're already enough, Aldrich said fiercely. You were enough the moment you chose to save a freezing child instead of saving yourself. You were enough every morning you woke up and chose to stay. You were enough every time you made Alara laugh, or held her when she cried, or taught me how to be her father again. You are more than enough, Mara. The certainty in his voice broke something open in her chest. She crossed the distance between them, closing the gap until they stood close enough to touch. I want to stay, she said, not for the gold or the comfort or even just for Alara, though I love her more than I knew possible. I want to stay for you. For this. For whatever this could become. Aldrich's hand rose, trembling slightly, and cupped her cheek. His thumb brushed away her tears with infinite gentleness. Are you certain? He asked quietly. Because once you choose this, choose us, I will do everything in my power to keep you safe and happy. I will honor you, cherish you, build a life with you if you'll let me. But I need to know you're sure. I'm sure, Mara said. She leaned into his touch, letting herself feel the warmth of his palm against her skin. I've never been more sure of anything. The kiss, when it came, was soft, gentle. A question asked, and answered. His lips moved against hers with the careful reverence of someone holding something precious they'd thought they'd never find. Mara felt it all the way to her bones, warmth spreading through her chest like sunrise. When they finally pulled apart, Aldrich rested his forehead against hers. Their breathing mingled in the small space between them. Thank you, he whispered, for finding us in that storm, for staying. For giving us this second chance at being whole. Thank you for letting me, Mara said, for seeing me as more than just an orphan with nowhere else to go. I see you as everything, Aldrich said. The door to the study burst open. Alara stood there in her nightgown, clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide. Papa? Mara? Are you kissing? They broke apart, though Aldrich kept one hand on Mara's waist. Alara didn't look upset. She looked fascinated. And hopeful, maybe, Aldrich said carefully. How do you feel about that, sweetheart? Alara's face split into the brightest smile Mara had ever seen. Does this mean Mara is staying forever? Not just 1 month? We were just discussing that, Aldrich said. What do you think? Should Mara stay? Yes, Alara said immediately. She ran forward, throwing her arms around Mara's legs. Forever and ever. You promised you wouldn't leave. I did promise, Mara said, kneeling down to meet the child's eyes. And I'm keeping that promise. I'm not going anywhere. Elara threw herself into Mara's arms with enough force to nearly knock them both over. Then she pulled back just enough to grab her father's hand and tug him down too. Now hug, she commanded. All together. Aldrich's arms came around them both, creating a circle of warmth and safety. They stayed like that for a long moment. Three people who'd each been lost finding themselves found in each other. Perfect, Elara whispered against Mara's shoulder. We're perfect now. Not quite perfect yet, Aldrich said. He pulled back slightly, meeting Mara's eyes over his daughter's head. There's something I need to do first. He stood, drawing Mara up with him. Elara stepped back, watching with bright curiosity as her father took both of Mara's hands in his. Mara, Aldrich said. His voice was formal, but his eyes were warm. These past 4 weeks you've become part of our family in every way that matters. You've brought light, and laughter, and love back into our lives. You've taught us how to heal, how to hope, how to live again instead of just existing. He squeezed her hands gently. I know we've only known each other a short time. I know this is fast. But I've lived 700 years, and I've learned that when you find something real, something true, you don't let it slip away. So I'm asking you, not as a king to a subject, but as a man to a woman, as a father to the person who saved his daughter's life. Mara's breath caught. Aldrich, will you stay with us permanently? Will you let me court you properly? Will you give me the chance to build a life with you, slowly and carefully, at whatever pace you need? Will you let us become the family we're already beginning to be? Tears spilled down Mara's cheeks again, but she was smiling so wide it hurt. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. Elara let out a squeal of pure joy and launched herself at them again. They caught her together, Aldrich's arms around them both, the three of them laughing and crying and holding tight. That night, after Elara had finally been convinced to go to sleep, Mara stood on the balcony outside her room. Rain had cleared, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of earth and growing things. Behind her, the palace glowed with warm light. Somewhere in its halls, Aldrich was finishing the day's final duties before coming to say goodnight. Somewhere in the nursery, Elara slept peacefully, no longer haunted by nightmares of loss. Mara thought about the girl who'd walked through the snowstorm 4 weeks ago. That girl had been so lost, so alone, so certain her life was over before it had really begun. She'd had nothing but a copper coin and fading hope. Now, she had everything. A child who loved her. A man who saw her, a purpose that filled the hollow spaces grief had carved. She'd found them in the snow. Or perhaps they'd found her. Either way, Mara was finally home. 6 months later, the palace held a winter festival. Not grand or formal, but intimate and joyful. Lanterns hung from every tree in the courtyard, their light dancing across snow that fell in gentle drifts. The gates were open to citizens from the city, common people who'd heard stories about their king's miraculous change. The king who smiled now, who walked among them with his daughter on his shoulders and his betrothed at his side. Mara wore a dress of deep blue velvet, simple compared to noble fashions but beautiful nonetheless. A silver chain around her neck held a pendant, Aldrich's first courting gift, a crystal that caught light like frozen stars. Elara wore matching blue, her white blonde hair braided with ribbons Mara had taught her to tie herself. She darted through the crowd, greeting children and adults alike, signing to those who'd learned, and speaking to those who hadn't, completely at ease. Look how far she's come, Beatrice said, appearing at Mara's elbow. The old servant had tears in her eyes, from that frightened child who couldn't bear to let anyone close to this. It's remarkable. She did it herself, Mara said. She just needed time and safety. And love, Beatrice added. She needed what you and the king gave her. Both of you, together. She patted Mara's hand. I've served this family 40 years. I watched him with his first wife, saw the love they shared, and I see it again now. Different, but just as real. You're good for him, child. Good for both of them. And they're good for me, Mara said softly. Aldrich found her a few minutes later, weaving through the crowd with Alara still perched on his shoulders. The princess was laughing, pointing out decorations and waving at people she recognized. He set her down gently when they reached Mara, and she immediately ran off to play with a group of children building a snow sculpture. Alone? Aldrich asked, offering his arm. Not anymore, Mara said, taking it. They walked together through the festival, watching people celebrate. Somewhere musicians played, their music drifting through the cold air. Vendors sold warm cider and roasted nuts. Children threw snowballs and built forts. It was perfect. Simple and perfect. This was a good idea, Mara said, opening the festival to everyone. It was your idea, Aldrich reminded her. You said the palace had been closed off too long. That grief had made us isolate ourselves from the people we serve. You were right. I usually am, Mara said with a small smile. He laughed, the sound still surprising and wonderful even after months of hearing it regularly. Yes, you usually are. They reached a quieter corner of the courtyard away from the main crowd. Aldrich turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. The lantern light painted gold across his features, softening the ancient tiredness that still sometimes showed. Mara, he said. I have something to ask you. She raised an eyebrow. Another question? You've been asking me questions for 6 months. When are you going to run out? Never, he said. But this one is important. He took a breath, and she saw nervousness there. Actual nervousness in a 700-year-old vampire king. It made her heart ache with tenderness. We've been courting properly, he said, taking our time, learning each other, building something real and lasting. And it's been, he paused, searching for words, it's been the happiest I've been in longer than I can remember. Me too, Mara said softly. I know we agreed to wait, Aldrich continued. To be patient, to let this unfold naturally. But I find myself wanting to ask, hoping, his hands tightened on hers. Marry me. The words were simple but weighted with everything. Marry me and be Alara's mother in truth, not just in heart. Marry me and be my queen, my partner, my love. Marry me and let me spend whatever time we have, whether it's your human lifetime or longer, making you happy. Help me rule. Help me be a better father. Help me be a better man. Marry me, Mara, and make our family complete. Mara's vision blurred with tears. She'd known this was coming, had hoped for it, but hearing the words still stole her breath. Yes, she whispered. Then louder, yes. Of course, yes. Aldrich's face transformed. He pulled her close, kissing her with a depth of feeling that had grown over months of careful courtship. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mara laughed. Should we tell Alara? Do you really think she doesn't already know? Aldrich said dryly. She's been planning our wedding since the 2nd month, drawing pictures, choosing flowers, asking Beatrice about cake. Oh gods, Mara said. Is that why she keeps asking me my favorite color? That's why, Aldrich confirmed. His expression softened. She loves you so much. She calls you Mama when she thinks we can't hear. I know, Mara said, her throat tight. I heard her yesterday, asked if it was okay. She said her first mama would want her to be happy, that having 2 mamas, one in her heart and one holding her hand, made her the luckiest girl in the world. Aldrich's eyes glistened. His arms tightened around Mara. Thank you, he said roughly. For loving her, for loving us, for choosing this life when you could have chosen anything. I chose everything, Mara said. When I chose you. They stood together in the falling snow, watching their daughter play with other children, surrounded by celebration and light. The lost orphan, and the grieving king, the frozen child, and the woman who'd saved her. 3 broken pieces that had found each other in a storm and built something whole. Papa, Mara Alara called, running toward them with snow in her hair and joy on her face. Come help us build a snow palace. It's going to be huge. We're coming, Aldrich called back. Then quietly, to Mara, ready? Always, she said. They joined their daughter in the snow, building castles and kingdoms and futures. Later, when historians wrote about King Aldrich's reign, they would mark this period as a time of great change. The king who'd been distant and stern became known for his compassion. Laws were passed protecting orphans and vulnerable children. Resources poured into villages that had been neglected. The palace gates opened regularly, inviting common people in for festivals and hearings and celebrations. But those closest to the king knew the truth. The change hadn't come from political strategy or calculated policy. It had come from a single moment on a winter night when a lost orphan girl chose to save a freezing child instead of saving herself. From 4 weeks that became 6 months, that became a lifetime. From the simple revolutionary act of choosing love over fear, connection over isolation, hope over despair, from a family built not by blood or duty, but by choice. Mara married Aldrich in the spring. It was a small ceremony in the palace chapel, attended only by those who mattered most. Elara served as flower girl, taking her duties with utmost seriousness. Beatrice cried through the entire event. Master Cornelius officiated with scholarly precision and thinly veiled emotion. When Mara walked down the aisle, she wasn't thinking about crowns or titles or the fact that she was marrying a king. She was thinking about the man waiting for her at the altar, the man who'd learned to laugh again, the man who read bedtime stories in silly voices and played dragons in the nursery and looked at her like she'd hung the moon and stars, the man who'd taken a broken family and helped her make it whole. "I love you," Aldrich said when she reached him, breaking protocol to speak before the ceremony began. "I know," Mara said, smiling. "I love you too." The vows were traditional, but they meant something different when spoken with such intention. To love and cherish, to stand together through joy and sorrow. To build a life worth living. When Aldrich kissed his new queen, Elara cheered so loudly it echoed off the chapel ceiling. The wedding feast was intimate, held in the family dining room that had become their sanctuary. Stories were told, and toasts were made. Beatrice embarrassed them both with tales of their courtship. Master Cornelius gave a surprisingly moving speech about the transformative power of kindness. Elara presented them with a drawing she'd made, showing 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun. Papa, Mama, and me, she'd written at the bottom in careful letters. Forever family. Mara hung it in their private chambers, where she would see it every morning for years to come. A reminder of what mattered, not crowns or palaces or power, but this. 3 people who'd found each other when they were lost and refused to let go. That night, after the celebrations ended and Elara had been put to bed, Aldrich and Mara stood together on the balcony outside their chambers. The same balcony where Mara had stood 6 months ago, marveling at how much had changed. "Queen Mara now," Aldrich said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," Mara admitted. "I still don't know what I'm doing." "Good," Aldrich said. "Neither do I, and I've been king for centuries. We'll figure it out together." "Together," Mara agreed, leaning back against his chest. "Tell me something. Anything. Do you regret it?" Aldrich asked quietly. "Choosing this life? Choosing us? You could have taken the gold and references, started fresh somewhere new. Built whatever future you wanted." Mara turned in his arms to face him. "I did build the future I wanted," she said. "This is it. You and Elara, and whatever comes next. This is everything I could have hoped for and more. Even the scary parts." "Even the scary parts," Mara confirmed, "because I'm not facing them alone anymore." "Neither am I," Aldrich said. He kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips. "Thank you for finding us in that storm." "Thank you for being worth finding," Mara said. They stayed on the balcony until the stars came out, talking and dreaming and planning. They discussed future projects, improvements for the kingdom, ways to help more children like the ones Mara had been. They talked about the family they were building and the life they would create together. And when they finally went inside, it wasn't to separate chambers or lonely beds. It was to a home they'd built together, to a family that had chosen each other, to a future that stretched bright and open before them, full of possibility and hope. 5 years passed. Ilara grew from a frightened 3-year-old into a confident 8-year-old who spoke 3 languages, could sign fluently, and had strong opinions about everything from palace policy to the proper way to build snow forts. She started a program teaching sign language to children throughout the kingdom, inspired by the tutors who'd taught her. Every month she visited orphanages with Mara, bringing books and toys and, most importantly, attention, making sure no child felt invisible or forgotten. Aldrich grew too, in ways that had nothing to do with age. The stern, distant king became known for his wisdom and compassion. He walked among his people regularly, listening to their concerns, making changes that actually helped. He established councils that included common voices, not just nobles. He reformed laws that had been unjust, rebuilt villages that had been neglected, created safety nets for the vulnerable. But when he came home each night, he was just Papa, just a man who played with his daughter and loved his wife, and tried his best to be worthy of the second chance he'd been given. Mara stepped into her role as queen slowly, carefully, learning as she went. She made mistakes and fixed them. She championed causes others ignored, focusing on orphans and vulnerable children, using her own story to create change. She never forgot where she came from, never let the crown make her forget what it felt like to be invisible and alone. The palace transformed under her influence. More windows stayed open, more doors stayed unlocked, more laughter echoed through halls that had been silent too long. And when people asked her secret, how she'd managed such change, she always gave the same answer. "I just chose to stay," she'd say. And it made all the difference. On a winter evening exactly 5 years after the snowstorm that brought them together, the family gathered in the nursery. It was tradition now. Every year on this date, they told the story. Ilara, now old enough to remember parts of it herself, would curl up between her parents and listen to how they became a family. Once upon a time, Mara began, there was a little girl lost in a terrible storm. She was cold and scared, and very, very alone. And there was a woman, Ilara continued, taking up the story the way she always did, who was also lost and cold and alone. But when she found the little girl, she didn't leave. She stayed, even when it was hard, even when she was afraid, because that's what love does, Aldrich finished softly. It stays. The 3 of them sat together in comfortable silence, watching snow fall outside the windows. The same snow that had nearly taken everything, now just a reminder of how far they'd come. "Papa?" Ilara said after a while. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm glad Mara found me in the storm." "So am I," Aldrich said, pulling his daughter close while reaching for his wife's hand, "every single day." "Me too," Mara whispered, squeezing his fingers. "Me too." Outside, the snow continued to fall. But inside, in the warmth and light of the family they'd built, everything was exactly as it should be. 3 people who'd been lost had found each other. And in that finding, they'd all come home.